These rookie regulators have got moxie and not much else. After months of deep-throwing and backstage bickering about who should regulate the nation's roughly 20,000 investment advisory firms, this week there was movement. Two students at the University of Mississippi Law School held a news conference to announce that if no one else was ready to oversee independent financial advisors, they would do it. Timothy Collin, a 25-year-old second-year student, and Tyler Roberts, 26, who is in his third year, launched the self-regulatory Organization for Independent Investment Advisors to provide investors with the best protection we can, Mr. Collins says. A self-regulatory organization, or SRO, is an industry group authorized by Congress to enforce rules approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Messrs. Collin and Roberts have no money, no staff, and no experience. They don't have the required congressional authorization to become financial regulators, nor do they have the needed official recognition from the SEC. About all they do that is moxie. Something is tragicomically wrong when a couple of quixotic newbies can seize the moral high ground on regulating the nation's advisory firms, which collectively handle an estimated 38 trillion. We are one of We are once getting the ball rolling, Mr. Roberts says. No one else has done it yet. Last year, financial reform law required the SEC to advise Congress on how investment advisors could be regulated more effectively. The SEC is able to examine only about 9% of large advisors each year. Smaller advisory firms are regulated by state authorities, some of whom have their own budgetary struggles. In January, the agency reported back to lawmakers with several options. The SEC could assess user fees on advisors, enabling it to inspect them more often. Congress could authorize one or more SROs to oversee advisors, or the Financial Industry Regulatory Authority, the giant that oversees Wall Street, could examine the roughly 88% of brokers-affiliated advisors. Although many think FINRA has inside track, no one in Washington seems to know when the issue will be settled. Many advisors who uphold a fiduciary standard, the obligation to put clients' interest first, don't believe FINRA is up to the task. With its roots in the brokerage business, FINRA has historically required members to ensure only that investments pass the lower hurdle of suitability for clients, although FINRA says it now supports a fiduciary standard. But these advisors' membership associations are generally reluctant to get into the regulation business. They would rather have the SEC expand its oversight, although nobody thinks the agency has enough money to do so. Investment advisors are spread out across the country, so it is resource intensive to go out and examine them on a regular basis, says Thomas Selman, FINRA's head of regulatory policy. We are well positioned to do that. Others would have to make sure that they have the resources. FINRA, which collects fees from its thousands of member firms, have roughly 2 billion in assets. A few of our own members have suggested to us that we should seriously consider the idea of becoming an SRO for advisors, says David Titsworth, Executive Director of the Investment Advisor Association, a trade group for more than 5,500 larger firms. The financial dimensions of that are very daunting, especially when you know that FINRA is lobbying for the job. He reckons that it might cost upward of 100 million a year to run a special regulator for advisors. That is upward of 100 million a year more than the students in Oxford, Mississippi has amassed so far. Messrs. Collins and Roberts argued that their regulatory group would oversee the 10% or so of advisors who want to be held to the most stringent standards and suggest that FINRA could take the majority of advisors who work at brokerage firms. FINRA is the main regulator, that's a done deal, asserts Mercer Bullard, the professor at the University of Mississippi Law School who advised the student on their proposal. But would the SEC take the position that no one else is going to be allowed to apply as an SRO, even if they are going to hold members to a higher standard than FINRA? He asks. An SEC spokesman declined to elaborate on what the agency said in its January report. With two idealistic rookies end up in charge of regulating thousands of financial advisors, it doesn't seem likely, but they might shame others into action. In the meantime, investors need to gather and check references, ask lots of questions, and comb through an advisor's mandatory disclosure known as Form ADV. Your own skepticism remains the most vigilant form of regulation.